You're listening to the Bear in Mind podcast, episode number 30.
A podcast uncovering identity, color, and load, where driving yourself crazy is totally sane and curable. Now your host, T. Bias.
It's episode 30, and it's all about love. And so every 10 episodes, I talk about something I was indifferent to or something that I hated and now love. And today, it's about actors. And if you already love actors, I think you'll find even more reasons in this episode to have an appreciation for them. And if you were kind of in the indifferent bucket, kind of like I was, you'll maybe look at the acting craft a little bit differently. And maybe the next time you watch a film or a television program, you might reflect on the 3 things I'm going to share with you about why I today love actors. So before this point, I was actually indifferent to acting. I didn't pay much attention to it. And the only way I was kind of aware of actors or maybe what was going on with them is I had a good friend. She would read all of the different kind of magazines that report on actors, and she would constantly inform me what's happening with them, what shows are doing or anything about their personal lives. And I didn't really care to hear anything about this kind of information. And then at a certain point, I started watching a lot more interviews. I was kind of doing this kind of mini research where I was watching a ton of interviews with different types of celebrities, like from authors to musicians to actors. And I started kind of not appreciating actors because I kind of found a lot of things that they said in interviews coming from entitlement. And that's where I think the negativity for me came from, is that I would listen to their story and then I would automatically assume this part of this element of their story, was coming from entitlement. And well, I was wrong. So I'm going to share with you the 3 reasons how kind of my negative viewpoint of actors has changed through 3 learnings that happened outside of listening to actors' interviews and things like that, and then putting it together and then hearing stories from actors later on after I put some of these constructs in my head together, how then I started to really appreciate the actors and the actors that are pursuing their craft. So the first reason is really a big one. I had been taught this by different people, by psychologists and different readings and books and things like this, but I didn't actually really believe it and put it together. And it came about by understanding the acting profession. And the construct is that your thoughts actually create your feelings. And that's kind of hard to believe because we often think that our feelings come from how somebody else behaves, when actually our feelings come from how we think about somebody else's behavior. So if we become angry or something like that, it's because of the thought that we have about somebody else's behavior. And I just want to clarify that has nothing to do with when somebody actually physically hurts you or anything like that. That's a body to mind sensation, so that's excluding all of that. But if you are to hear or see something, it then is a thought, and then it becomes your emotions. And actors are actually proof of this cognitive psychology construct, because in acting, they need to express emotion, and they need to do it well in order to be, pretty good at acting. However, in their situation and whatever character they're portraying, they're not really that character, and that situation that they're in is not technically really happening to them. So if they need to express anger and create the anger emotion in their character, they need to generate that from inside them. They need to think of something, and then they need to feel that emotion and then express it outwardly through their acting. And now there's different ways that actors do this. There's a kind of, it's called method acting, I think, where an actor will relive a past event that had that emotion. If they're trying to think about fear or something, they'll relive an event in their past to feel fear and show that in the scene. And so actors actually prove this cognitive psychology point that our thoughts create our emotions. The second reason I started to appreciate actors was through the word no. And you think that you and I hear the word no a lot, and actually that's not true. Actors will hear the word no more often than you would think. And I came across some interviews from actors, and these weren't interviews with famous actors. They were working actors. However, they were constantly looking for the next job. They hadn't made their, breakthrough role, or to the point where people come to them offering them roles in films or television. And so they have to continually go out there, and it's a competitive field, and they have to hear no. And when I heard an interview with a working actor, I was thinking about the time I was looking for a job in another country. So it was not easy for me to find a job as a foreigner. And yes, I heard the word no, but then I heard this actor, and the number of auditions she goes on, the number of times she heard no before she got her next job, the number was amazing in a year. And here I was looking for a job it took me about 4 to 5 months to find a job. And I had not been on that many interviews compared to the actor had been on her number of auditions in that same amount of time frame. And so they are actually have an immense amount of ability to handle word no. They get rejected, and they still continue to pursue their career. And it had me thinking about the number of times I had given up on stuff just because I had heard no. And yeah, it's quite embarrassing, actually. I mean, they hear no all the time, and here I hear no a couple times, and I'm like, okay, I'm done. And I think that that's actually really impressive that they're able to handle a constant rejection. And the third reason that I now appreciate actors is criticism. And when in theater and in film and in television shows, there are the formal critics that write a review about the show, and that, that's their full-time job. However, today, because we have social media and a lot of actors are on social media, and it's a positive thing to get to know somebody who you might admire, what happens is that opens up more criticism. Beyond just the professional critics of theater, films, and television, they get criticized by everybody because of keyboard courage. And those comments are often anonymous, and those comments are really attackful. And on top of just handling all of the criticism that comes in their industry, they're handling criticism from fans and people who are not fans. And that's an immense amount of overload when you compare it to, like, you and me. How often do we hear criticism? We may hear it from maybe our partner or a friend occasionally, and we may get the 1 or 2 comments on our social media posts that maybe we don't agree with or we think we're being criticized. But apart from that, we're not inundated with the same amount of criticism that comes towards actors, and even to the point where they're being human. They're expressing an opinion. Maybe it has nothing to do with their field, their craft, and they will express an opinion on politics or something like that, and they get criticized for that, for merely stating an opinion, which they very much have a right to, just like you and I do. And it can get quite out of hand. And then the expectation is often that they should be able to handle this amount of criticism because it's part of their profession, or they're famous, so therefore we're allowed to say these things to another human being. And what we forget is oftentimes the amount of criticism. Nobody receives this amount of criticism in one post or even in 1 hour that a famous actor receives. So when I've seen or read articles about actors handling this criticism and going through some of it, I had an immense amount of appreciation for them having to have that extra mental strength to not only get through rejection, constant rejection from going on auditions, but also how they have to handle other people's opinions. So I hope you found some love for actors based on these 3 reasons. And to sum it up, I'd have to say that this profession has an immense amount to do with commitment rather than entitlement. And so I'm going to leave you with a quote from actor and Duchess of Sussex, Meghan Markle, and she says from her keynote speech at the Create and Cultivate conference in 2016, "Don't give it 5 minutes if you're not going to give it 5 years." I'll check back with you next week.
Thanks for listening. Listen for a new episode next Tuesday by subscribing on your favorite podcast platform. Bye for now.